Set, the Egyptian god of darkness. I am Set, the father of the gods. I shall never come to an end. The Book of the Dead, the Egyptian mythology of gods and powerful deities, is perhaps history's most elaborate and evasive within the conception of their opposing powers. The Egyptian god of chaos and storms, Set, called also 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗱𝗶𝗴𝗲, Set or Sethum, was revered in the 3rd millennia BC and forward, originally as a positive force of movement and foreign lands. It was later on that Set became a form of the opposer, with red being a sacred color, and his minions being actual demons that tested or destroyed others. Set was commonly perceived as a god of war, who taught some pharaohs the art of shooting the bow and arrow, etc. The Egyptian Book of the Dead presents Set as the lord of the northern sky, who is over storms, cold weather and darkness. Set was perhaps the most significant Egyptian god, in that he alone was the god of mystery and the unknown, both the shadow and fire. As being a patron of the deserts, Seth was also revered as a deity over the scorching heat of the desert sands. This concept continued on in the Persian Ahriman and the Islamic Shaitan, which shall be discussed in further detail later on in this treatise. Verily, the soul of Set, which is greater than all the gods, hath departed. From the papyrus of Ani, Set was known as a god of unrest, who continually fought with Horus, his brother, and was the antagonist and murderer of Osiris, a god of stasis. Set also protected Ra on his journeys through the underworld, and was able to master the chaotic force of 𝗖𝗆𝗱𝗶𝗄, a serpent of darkness. Set is known in the Book of the Dead as having legions of devils, known as Seba as well as 𝗧𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗍, who obey his commands. It seems also that there were a group of rebels who were of Set and were defeated early on. Set is mentioned in the Egyptian Book of the Dead as having the skin of a bull. In the 11th section of the Tuat called 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆, Set is in the form of a serpent and called Set, meaning the eternal Set. When Osiris came again, Typhon plotted with 72 comrades, and with Arso, the queen of Ethiopia, to slay him. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, Set is primarily regarded the same as the Greek Typhon, a serpent-like demon god who is a patron spirit of sorcery and magic. Plutarch explained that in Egyptian astronomy Seth or Typhon was connected to the solar world, while Osiris was associated with the moon. The sun was considered very hostile as it dried up and made lands inhabitable, while the moon nourished and brought moisture. Plutarch writes the Seth means compelling and overmastering, being a powerful force of chaos and order. Typhon was collectively later known and associated to the Earth's shadow, which they bring into the lunar cycle and the eclipse. In such an aspect, Seth is highly significant to the balance of chaos and order, as he creates situations for both to occur. Set and Horus indeed have a close connection, as not only brothers, but also deific opposites. It is suggested by 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆 that Horus means something similar to he who is above, and Set therefore, he who is below, thus holding a significance to, as above, so below. And the Baphomet idol long regarded as a form of hidden knowledge. Considering Set's name had similar hieroglyphic connections to stone, it can be suggested further that this god was a personification of the lands of death, stony land and the desert wastes. Set's direction was also often considered south as well, and his opposing side of the north. In later times, as previously mentioned, Ahriman has been long associated with not only the north, but also the south, making reference to his powers over both scorching heat and cold. The head of Ramses II has been shown being duly crowned by both Set and Horus, indicating power and knowledge. One reference of which Set makes comment is in the crowning, "I will give thee all life, and strength and health." Thus, although considered often a devil and the most feared god, this power could be used in a positive aspect as well. Set was also friendly to the shades of the dead as well. Set was said to purify and Horus strengthen. The backbone of the dead was considered the backbone of Set. Another title of Set is 𝗧𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆, the Egyptian name associated with Set as the archfiend and devil. It was as the adversary becoming the mastering force over 𝗍𝗶𝗶𝗄. Thus slowly 𝗍𝗶𝗶 became a form of Set and vice versa. The demonic beasts, serpents and such located and dwelling deep in the waters were considered of Set and therefore part of his essence. Similarly, anything with red was often considered to be of Set, as red was the color commonly associated with fire and aggression. 𝗍𝗶𝗶 and its brood have been referred to as children of rebellion, and were opponents to the sun god, while Set has been considered for being a beneficial god. His darker side lays foundations of power and awe, from which lived on even beyond his name being denounced and demonized. The names of the form of Set as 𝗍𝗶𝗶 are indeed many, some of which are 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏, darkener of the earth, 𝗍𝗆𝗲𝗏, backward face, 𝗍𝗆𝗏𝗏, doubly evil one, 𝗼𝗆𝗆𝗏, devourer, all of which describe the storm demon, who is called also 𝗧𝗆𝗏𝗏𝗏 to the fourfold fiend. In the gnosis of Set, who overcame the serpent, for 𝗍𝗶𝗶 to become a part of this being presents a powerful gnosis for the aspiring sorcerer. One may refer to the concept of predatory spiritualism, absorbing the prey and taking from it the most valid or a subjective aspect of its being. Thus, by Set killing 𝗍𝗶𝗶, essentially this serpent becomes an aspect of Set itself, albeit a mastered aspect to be used when Set chooses. 𝗍𝗶𝗶 also bore the name of Rebek, a monster serpent form of Set who had many helpers being serpents, noxious creatures and demons. It is further connected that Thoth was said to have gotten the knife to slay the bull from Set, thus making parallel the name of Smain with Set, being violence. One specific dwelling place of Set was called Set Amentet, which is the mountain of the underworld, which is a cemetery in the desert on the west banks of the Nile. Set is also closely connected with a former death god called Sekka, who was later merged with Osiris and became something rather different in nature. In the Qiuat, Sekka resided within a kingdom called Rostau, from which he sat upon a throne in majesty, having numerous legions of winged serpents, devils called 𝗧𝗆𝗆, and other monsters, which devoured various shades of the dead who were sent there. It is written in the Book of the Dead that Sekka's throne is pyramidal in form, filled with darkness. He appears commonly in the Qiuat as a mummified man, but has a hawk's head and a pair of wings, which come forth from the back of a two-headed serpent. The symbolism of the hawk and the twin serpents are later presented in the Persian descriptions of the adversary. Firstly, a symbol of Ahriman was a hawk attacking a sparrow, and the twin serpents appearing from an Ahrimanic kiss on the shoulders of the king 𝗧𝗿𝗍𝗶𝗁, who later became 𝗍𝗍𝗍𝗏, the storm demon. While these similarities cannot be assumed to be directly related, they are by all instances interesting. The constellation of the bull, or bull's thigh, is related to Set, often called Bull of Double Brilliance. This is perhaps the brightest constellation around the north celestial pole, otherwise known as the Great Bear or Little Dipper. The mummified hawk, that is called the Lord of the South, is connected with Set in this aspect. This is the Sekka god, who early on was considered close to Set before his transformation in accordance with Osiris. The home of Set is 𝗍𝗶𝗄, the constellation. Set was considered the eighth child of the gods of Anu, and was of Nut. As the god of darkness and storms, he was alone the one who could withstand the stare of the serpent 𝗍𝗶𝗶, thus controlling the storm demon and later it becoming a part of Saturn himself. Set as being not only the Lord of the South, he later was associated with the North, becoming the Lord of the Northern Sky in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. His primary associations were hostility, war and storms. Thus Set may be viewed as a deific force of motion and opposition. 8's recent years has been a number significant to chaos, being the 8-pointed chaos star, and the Algol sigil, the sabbatical star, etc. The combat which took place on the day when Horus fought with Seth, during which Seth threw filth in the face of Horus, and Horus crushed the genitals of Seth. This storm was the raging of Ra, the thundercloud, which Seth sent forth against the right eye of Ra the sun. Thoth removed the thundercloud from the eye of Ra, and brought back the eye living, healthy, sound, and with no defect in it to its owner. From the papyrus of Ani, here we see that Set was a sorcerer god, throwing filth, and then thunderclouds. He controlled the elements of earth and the air. Set, although being injured, arose in might again after the battle, and later reached into obscurity, to appear again in other cults outside of Egypt under different names, all the while possessing the essence of which he created the adversary. Set opened the paths of the two eyes, the sun and the moon. From the papyrus of Ani, the formula mentioned in the Book of the Dead refers to a magical formula which held associations to Set's hostility against Horus, but also their connection therein. Within the Luciferian, which cult Set represents the magician, which beheld and brought forth the possibilities within, by the unknown and darkened places, does he grow strong and reside. The opposing god of Horus, Set are early manifestations of the adversary. That is to say, Horus represents day, or the purity of fire, while Set represents night and strengthening the self, and also the opposite, which Set purifies and Horus strengthens. Set is also considered in the Egyptian Book of the Dead to be the greatest of all the gods, as it is Saturn who has mastered the dragon of chaos 𝗧𝗶𝗶𝗁, and it now serves him and became part of his essence. Saturn, as he is often called, is considered the most ancient yet distinctly clear form of the opposer and adversary, 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗱𝗁. Born 1920, date of death currently unknown, the obscure Luciferian called himself a Satanist or a Satanist, and was a priest of Set and Anubis, of a well-known witchcraft coven in London under Gerald Gardner, a former student of Aleister Crowley. 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗃 was known as Hamrat, and was a mortician by trade. His primary expression was art, in which he painted mostly Egyptian-styled images, as can be seen in the rare manuscript, the Book of 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗃, in which 𝗃 presents a powerful, alternate study and design of the tarot. 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗃 painted murals in Beleskine House, Crowley's former residence, where the Abramelin workings were conducted, and the Goetia was edited. In the late 60s, Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, was a long correspondent with 𝗃, who both shared similar ideas in certain areas. It is suggested by 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗃 in the Book of 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗃 that Anubis was the bastard son of Saturn and Azit, Isis. It is obvious that 𝗃 considered himself a messenger rather than an author of any system. This is noted by his attribution of Hamrat, magical name, as associated with the page card in the tarot, Set Sun Onpu, Anubis. In the system arranged by 𝗃, presents him as a magician, and the opener of the ways. 𝗃 also wrote in Necromanion a description of a so-called elaborate high-sex magic ritual known as Ankar. Judging from the triple hermetic circle of Hamrat, the focus was spiraling energy through the self with the forces of the god forms. Thus their masks signify deific power, assumed by him or her who wore the mask. Austin Osmond Spare was an artist who captured images of Set in sigillic forms in various publications. Spare illustrated and practiced a form of sorcery which holds a strong foundation to modern Luciferian practice, specifically with the witch's sabbat and other avenues of magical practice. Existing as dual, they are identical in desire. By their duality, there is no control, for will and belief are ever at variance, and each would shape the other to its ends. In the issue neither winds, as the joy is a covert of sorrow. Let him unite them. The Book of Pleasure, Austin Osmond Spare. In Spare's grimoire, The Book of Pleasure, he describes an almost instinctual Luciferian concept of obtaining desired results through the fall into darkness, i.e., 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗃𝗁. The 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗃𝗁 is a formula in which the sorcerer enters a state of exhaustion and essentially blacks out and forgets the meaning of his rite. By doing this, he falls into unconsciousness or delirium from which the concept of I does not exist. This is the Sethian test. From challenging the essence of yourself, does your ability to become something better manifest into something greater? Observe the illustration by AOS entitled The 𝗧𝗿𝗆𝗃𝗁. Here the skull-masked individual ascends from the sigil itself. On the very left hailed by Set, who stands upon the Alpha and Omega, called also as 𝗖𝗆 and as 𝗲𝗆os, a dualistic sigillic formula of the adversary. Here Set is the lord of sorcery. By his nature of opposition, does the self grow stronger through the rebellion of stasis and the fall into darkness. The face becomes a skull through self-love. Modern sorcery and magic is very much driven by the gnosis of Set, while hidden. One who has the eyes to recognize it obtains the Luciferian and Sethian potential. The witch cult in the 60s was a growing scene of exploring hermetic occultists who have not yet thrown the drape of dullness, which 𝗧𝗍𝗶𝗁𝗱 later became. Charles Pace wrote to Anton LaVey in 1974 about Gardner and Wicca, mentioning that Wiccan is a Saxon word which means enlightened ones, and not wise ones, referring to those who were enlightened from paganism to Christianity. Pace suggested that he gave the word Wicca along with his associates to Gardner, apparently as a joke. Gerald Gardner did not get the joke. Obviously, Charles Pace was meaning that light-hearted, as he was a high priest in a coven under the Wiccan and Gardner concepts. Even though he had a nasty falling out when them in the mid-70s, in Necrominion, the Book of Shades, it is reportable that his teachings of the Sethanic cult of masks were focused on self-transformation and Luciferian concepts. Alexander Sanders, an associate of Charles Pace, made mythological reference to Set and black witchcraft in his lecture, The Magic Circle of the Wicca. Truth is the monster of intellect, that which lies deep in the darker side of the subconscious. The knowledge of when man crawled on his stomach through the abysmal depths of a primeval swamp, the Alexander Lectures. In this essay, Sanders recognizes the significance of black witchcraft and how it develops the self, save for the dangers of self-destruction. Behold me, mortal, for I am thy God, the true image of thyself, and the very essence of life, yet within me lieth a magnitude greater than you can ever behold without. For I am both macrocosm and microcosm. Only your petty vanity could decree otherwise. Worship me, and I shall give you the stars. Reject me, and I shall give the depths of the abyss, for I lie within your own being. From the Book of Hermes from the Alexander's Lectures. In the manuscript of The Book of Tahuti, by Charles Pace, he writes that Hermes was Anubis who is death, 𝗏 or 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗋𝗆𝗋, who is the son of Set. It is said that Anubis is very similar to the Grecian Hecate, as they are deific forces over both the celestial and infernal realms, and like dogs, were able to see in the night, as Alexander Sanders wrote. The inverted triangle was the symbol of the left-hand path. After the Great Flood, the ancient Egyptians used these triangles to represent a triad of deities. The people of Nephcom, the Black Lands of Lower Egypt, used the triangle of darkness, led by Saturn and supported by Anubis and Sekhmet. Alexander's Lectures. Magic and sorcery within Egyptian cults survived long beyond the death of that culture. Consider the Greco-Roman period, when wax figures were implemented as focus points for various magical ceremonies. Many used wax figures as performing love spells, but were also used in cursing as well. As Set was the most powerful of the gods and equally a god of magic and infernal sorcery, he's a force which strengthens by the desire of force. There is an example of a spell which implements infernal spirits and wax figures to obtain the love of a woman, and was done through incantations of the infernal spirits. As witchcraft survived in medieval times, it was said that through the 𝗖𝗆𝗱𝗱𝗶𝗴𝗍 the witches were able to effectuate, by the power of their master, I invoke thee, who art in the void air, terrible, invisible, almighty God of gods, dealing destruction and making desolate. O thou that hattest, I invoke thee, Typhon Set. I perform the ceremonies of divination, for I invoke thee by the powerful name, which thou canst not refuse to hear. 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗋𝗆𝗶𝗴𝗏, 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, 𝗖𝗆sorrow, 𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, actiaphy, 𝗲𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃, 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃, 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃, 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃, amina. The Leiden Papyrus, edited by F. Griffith and Herb Thompson. As Set was considered to be friendly unto the shades of the dead, there is perhaps a closer connection between him and his illegitimate son Anpu, Anubis, than what can be commonly realized. The belief in the spirits of the dead and the survival of the psyche after physical death was a foundation of the magic of ancient Egypt. In accordance with the law, man consisted of a physical body, a double, a shadow, a soul, a heart, etc. The Ku itself was the spirit of the man, but the Ka was considered to be the spiritual body, which took nourishment from the offerings at the funeral ceremonies. The dead and such were honored among the Egyptians, who regularly brought food and drinks to appease the Ku into staying in its tomb. Aleister Crowley took a strong step in his presentation and revival of magic concerning Set. Crowley wrote in the Book of Thoth that Saturn is indeed Set, the lord of the Egyptian deserts, darkness and high places. Crowley makes similar connections between Shaitan and Satan, all being forms of Set. Incidentally, the Master Therian draws connections between 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗁, the sphere of Saturn, being the witch's sabbat. Here we find the manifestation of the adversary in a universal and initiatory role. The modern magician and sorcerer must be willing to focus on the beneficial and useful aspects of Sethian magic within a type of context. In other words, utilize the will to invigorate and empower the rituals of Sethan, which by use Set is made great within.